Because why? They kept kicking me down, I kept standing. And it was that terrible pain. You know how they say when you give birth, it's like your 26 bones or more being broken at the same time? Imagine your heart being broken over and over again. Over and over again. And you are unable to breathe in between. You're considered a liar. You're considered that you're not potential, you're not intellectual, you're not an educated person when you go to jail. This is why I represent a trauma reform bill that I personally also have my hands in. And I work side by side with my local Senate, legislators, and everyone. And I voice my own opinions. So it's important that we have everyone to support these bills and reject the other bills. Because even though we come home, I was like 3.5 years left to become a full physician. And I can't practice medicine. I'm still on probation. I came home, I got involved with my community. I became an advocate. I got my hands into almost everything. But you know what? I wanted my women to step forward. I became a facilitator of life skills, trauma informed healing, providing healing and everything, and educating these women that this is not where we end. You want to know something? I've been through a lot of stuff, and trust and believe. I was medically negligent in the prison system. I was not only verbally and mentally abused by the correctional officer, but I was physically abused by them as well. I was beat down and kicked down every which way possible. Why? Because my aura was white in there, and they didn't like that. They didn't like the fact that I earned respect from the higher ups. They didn't want that. That's a problem. And then I had support of inmates changing, going to school. I helped them by mentorship to get their GED and everything and further educate themselves. I even offered up to be their sponsors to assist them in any type of services that they may possibly need when it comes to mental health or substance abuse. I watch women go through seizures, withdraw, and die in front of me. I see women be beaten to the point where there was blood everywhere because they were aggravated onto it. I watch women starve because they didn't have no money in their butts, because they done exhausted their family with their mental health and their substance abuse, of the fact that they don't have no support. See, healing starts from within. This is why trauma is so important when it comes to the cultural system, because they need to be trained to be given that healing to start in there. If you can't be trained to heal, you just continue to tear down a person. You expect that person to come back intellectual, be strong, go back into society and be something when you already done tore them more than what they went in with. Oh, here's another thing too. I was pregnant with twins. Wow. And I'm a hematotal aborter, which means my pregnancies, under extreme stress, I miscarriage easily. My daughter was the one that survived from her twin miscarriage. Then I had 4 miscarriages of twin in between before I had my son, which his twin miscarriage. And my only child, my baby girl, was the last pregnancy that was only 1 baby and survived. And then when I went into the prison system, when I got incarcerated, I was pregnant with twins and miscarriage in there. And they refused to give me an STD test, which was mandatory, to draw blood, to make sure you don't have an STD so they could put you where you need to be put, feel comfortable. They automatically say that the person refused. Why? Because if I would have went back and said that you were the results of me losing my children, the STD test would have known that my HGC levels was up high. You know what I'm saying? That my pregnancy levels was up. Then I come home, I become a consultant with the Incarcerated Women's Working Group. I met Medusa Carter, who is the president and founder of Mary's Daughter for the Formerly Incarcerated. With myself and 5 other women, we decided to become co-founder of Dignity Act Now Collective. We teach impacted political training and leadership for reentry services. We facilitate life skill trainings. We're here. And we collaborate with multiple organizations. Why? And mass incarceration. and cash bail. Voice our opinions when it comes to laws that are being placed upon us. We are not individuals that should be having any statute of limitation. It's bad enough that when we come home with those serial numbers still attached to us, we're considered a menace to society, and we cannot overleap barriers. Look at me. I could be right now finishing up my medicine degree and practicing or running a medical facility. I'm that capable. Even with me being blind and intellectual and everything, I still have to fight for my disability, but I continue to work. I may not have good eyes, I may not have good ears, but I listen. My heart allows me to know what's right and what's wrong. When I saw women coming in, they were already demised from pain and suffering as is. And then when they were locked down, they suffer even more. And that's something I wanted to tell you, that also I put up a proposal to my own president, who is also the president for Marysville for Formerly Incarceration. I submitted a proposal which allowed me to now be the Family Intervention Preventative Support Specialist. I help women reunify with their children now. I fight DHS. Further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Movida Johnson Harrell is an activist who has fought for our communities on both sides of the gun. That's it. Movida? Right here. I love you too. I don't need that. Good evening, everyone. So first I want to thank my husband, wherever he went. Oh, there he is. I want to thank my husband because yesterday we actually left for a vacation. Just me and him were raising 2 10-year-old grandsons, and we're co-parenting our other 2 grandchildren who are 9 and 4. And we decided to take a vacation, just him and I, and we left yesterday. And we went to Atlantic City. And thank you for your patience and support to bring me back for this event today. As soon as we leave here, we're going back to Atlantic City. Enjoy. And it's actually a working trip because I am finishing my first memoir. Congratulations. So I want to thank the panel that spoke, earlier, and everybody that's been here holding space and just being community, right? Because the conversation earlier about trauma, had me thinking we're all traumatized, right? And like Jackie said, I don't want to hear no more about trauma-informed care because ain't nobody doing it anyway, right? But we have to find spaces for us to heal, not just individually, right, but as community, right? And it's really important, especially for those on the front line doing the work, trying to save the whole. We got to make sure that we take care of ourselves first. And I just had this a couple conversations with Jackie about me starting to have the ability to say no. And that's part of me helping myself to heal, right? So we talked about trauma earlier, and I was born into trauma, y'all. Most of us were born into trauma, right? I'm not just talking about the trauma that we carry in our DNA from slavery. I'm also talking about the trauma of a great-grandmother who was full-blooded Native American who decided to marry a white Irishman, and both of them were ostracized from their communities, right? So that trauma of my grandmother being called the half-breed and all of her siblings and her alcoholism, the 5 generations of drug addiction and alcoholism and domestic violence and all of that. And if we think that it happens in our family and it doesn't travel with us, think again. It goes where you go, right? So always had this hypervigilance about me, this innate fear, right? And I'm a 5-time co-victim of homicide.
On Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1975, my father was murdered in front of my family. He was shot in the chest with a double barrel shotgun. It was 21 days before my 9th birthday. And back then there were no victim services for communities, her trauma. And later I learned about other trauma as a child, right? And then she self-medicated with drugs and alcohol, so I lost my mother. And my only brother, who was 11 at the time, he was 2 years older than me, immediately developed PTSD and depression and began to act out. And because people didn't know how to address his issues, they labeled him with oppositional defiance disorder, which is a label that they slap on children of color that they don't know what to do with. Right? And then he wound up in and out of juvenile facilities and in and out of adult correctional facilities and dealing with his own issues of mental health and his own issues of drug addiction and homelessness. And on July 1st, 1991, my brother was murdered over a girl as his 5-year-old son sat in his lap and he was tying his shoes. So history repeated itself, because my nephew literally stood there at 5 years old and watched my brother bleed out on the floor. And I actually started this book after my brother was murdered. So I've been writing this book for 28 years. Right? So I've always been hyper-vigilant about violence. I've always been hyper-vigilant about protecting my black children once I had black children, and I literally got clean to protect my children. I have 26 years in recovery. I got clean September 15th, 1994. I went into a program for women with children, and I did what I had to do to take care of my children. And I'm a late bloomer. I went back to school, got my high school diploma at 30 years old, graduated from Penn 5 years later with 5 degrees. But it didn't take away that hypervigilance about violence, right? Because I had black sons. I had 2 daughters, I had 2 sons, and I was never really worried about my daughters, but I was always worried about my sons. Right? So me and my husband were that family in that community. You know that Brady Bunch family, right? We kept fruit roll-ups in the cabinet and juice boxes in the refrigerator, and all the kids gravitated toward my house because we rescued pit bulls, and my son Charles fixed electronics, so it was always bikes and, back then, VCRs, strewn across my porch. And I loved it, right? Because my logic was that if I took care of community, community would take care of my children. In July of 2007, my 2 sons were 14 and 16. They came to me, they said, "Mom, we know 9 boys murdered in this neighborhood." And I turned to my husband, I said, "It's time to go." And less than 6 months later, I packed my family up and moved them to Lansdowne, Delaware County, 20 block radius, dry town, you can't even buy beer, and everybody know everybody's dog's name. And I thought we were safe. 3 years to the day that we left Philadelphia. Actually, January 12th, my son came right down the street. My 18-year-old son, Charles, came down the street to Washington Lane in Musgrave to pick up his sister. 2 boys walked up to the car my son was sitting in, thought he was somebody else, and put 4 bullets in my son. And I lost my 18-year-old son. And I began the journey of fighting, not just for the boys who were on the side of the gun that my son was on, but the boys who were on the other side of the gun, because I understood that the problem was bigger than the gun and the 2 boys who pulled the trigger. I understood that those boys who pulled the trigger were also victims, in a sense, right? Because here's the logic. When you disinvest in communities of color, when you don't educate them, when they live in housing scarcity, when they live in food deserts, when they live in gentrification where before they had space in between them, but gentrification is pushing them on top of each other, when you have systemic racism, these are the situations that you're going to get. The conditions that we live in are very intentional. Don't be confused. We are supposed to be killing each other. This is genocide, right? So we wonder where are these kids getting these guns from? They can get a gun faster than they can get a meal, right? So here's the thing, I've been on this fight. We created the Charles Foundation a month after my son was murdered. It happened very organically. I know it ain't nothing but God, because I was out of my mind. Charles is an acronym for Creating Healthy Alternatives Results in Less Emotional Suffering. And I went on about the business of trying to save our children. And I ran across this country trying to save our children. I even went as far, wait a minute, I didn't even mention to y'all, in 1988 I was incarcerated for selling drugs. And I said I would never go back there again. I'm gonna come back to that, hold it, I'll be back here. But I went across this country attempting to save every kid I could possibly get my hands on. I literally got tired of sitting in front of legislators and begging them to help our children, so I had this bright idea to run. And I did, I ran. I ran in 2016, but I didn't win, and I didn't really want to win, right? I wanted to change the narrative. I wanted to make people really talk about the issues that were going on in our communities. And I changed that whole election cycle. I had congressmen mimicking my speech, right? And then I got the attention of somebody who I was able to get their ear to help me. And you know how I won? Because District Attorney Larry Krasner asked me to come into the DAO to be his supervisor for victim services and restorative justice. So I won. I have been part of a strategy called Focused Deterrence, where it's a positive peer pressure model where it uses those top 3% who are likely to shoot against one another. And what you tell them is, if one of you in the group shoot, all of you receive the consequences of that shooting. Meaning, if you got bad cases, you're going to the top of the list. You owe child support, you're going to the top of the list. You need help, you're going to the top of the list. You need a job, you're going to the top of the list. You need mental health treatment, you're going to the top of the list. I literally watched these boys transform before my eyes. So I went on about the business of spending the next 5 years of my life fighting to bring this program back to Philadelphia because the city would not fund it, and it was successful. 2013-14, we had over a 35% reduction in gun violence from that strategy alone, and the city would not fund it. So when I ran, that's what I ran for. And when I went into the DA's office, he helped me to find funding for that, and guess what the mayor did? Jim Kenney. He pulled out of a $500,000 proposal 4 days before we were submitting the proposal to fund patronage jobs. And then the party tapped me in January of 2019 to run, and I ran. And I won a 4-person race. I won 66% of the vote in a 4-person race, and I became the first hijabi ever elected to the Pennsylvania legislature. And in my swearing in, I was told I wasn't welcome there, and I believed them, and they came for me. But I went up to Harrisburg, and I did exactly what I said I was going to do. I brought $1.3 million back for that GVI strategy that's happening right now in Philadelphia. I brought over $6 million back to my district for community improvements, and I was indicted on December 4th of 2019 for corruption, and then I was gagged, so I couldn't even speak my truth. And I took a plea deal because if you lose a child to the cemetery, you ain't trying to lose a child to the prison. And they threatened to prosecute my husband and my daughter if I did not take a plea deal. So I took the gag is off now. It's gonna be in my book. So I took a plea deal to protect my family. But my plea deal included 3 months of RCF, 8.5 months house arrest, and 3 years parole. I went up, and I'm gonna end with this. I went up to RCF. They didn't want me up there. They wanted to send me up to Lehigh County because I was a high-profile case. I went up to RCF. The women elected me to be their block rep 2 weeks after getting there, against my will. My boo Adrian was in there loving on everybody. When COVID hit, I made sure that those women got out of their cells for showers and to call their families. I made sure that we had the DA and the chief defender on the phone through my husband to get their questions answered. They didn't have access to their judges. They didn't have access to their lawyers, and we were getting them answers. And that's only through the relationships that we build through community. Everybody is a part of the community. We can't leave nobody behind. None of our children are disposable. And I'm gonna end with this. March 5th, my son Dante went to California on a weekend trip, and he was killed in a random drive-by. My 30-year-old son, my last surviving son, has stood on the front line of this issue with me for the last 10 years, and he was murdered. And I would rather stay in my bed and die. But that ain't what God had for me. And I promised both my sons until my last breath, I'm gonna do something to change this.
Maria. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I will introduce you to the next speaker. Chelsea Elmore, also known as Queen Fierce, is a poet, creative, and passionate community organizer in our city. She represents new voices for reproductive justice on the front lines for the rights and well-being of Black and brown women, feminine, and girls.
Clap your hands, clap.
Have you cried for her? For this woman, to whom we do not know her history, but are certain of her future because it lies before us. Now 6 feet deep, beneath concrete she never even got a chance to walk upon. That same concrete, as cold as the body that lays on that floor, used to walk over her and stand over that same body to take a mugshot in prison clothes. She did not wear orange that day. She's blamed for having something to say. Silence is a virtue, so shut the fuck up while I disrespect you. Have you cried for her strength? For her to be arrogant enough to know her rights. But the price of arrogance these days is your life. And she didn't think she would have to pay that price. Bankrupt, because she erupted twice. Now I think once before I fail to signal or smoke and drive. I just increase my chances of staying alive and hoping that survival is worth biting my tongue and letting you think that you won this one. Us, Zero, them, Sandra, Kendra, Brianna, Trayvon, Eric, Michael, my brother, your cousin, hashtag say their names. Have you cried yet? Have you cried for the freedom that you think is worth it in a country that doesn't even honor human code? For the supremacy that is so apparent and apparently not in our favor, for the lives that only matter after someone dies in a way that we feel is wrong. And after I cry, I'm unclear of what my tears mean. Whose life will they save? What agenda will they disrupt? How will they comfort? Because I feel nothing and everything when I release them. I'm so numb to it, but it still hurts like hell. Oh well, at least I get to get up and support Uncle Sam tomorrow. Damn my sorrow, because who has time to fight when you just trying to live? Cry for her. Cry for her weaknesses that made her strong, for her death that made her famous. And while you're at it, shed a tear or two for yourself, because you are just one hashtag away from your life mattering, from there being gatherings like this and prayer vigils in your honor, from being the next poster child on an episode of Cops Going Wild. Tune in. The second slavery will be televised, but the revolution will be canceled because the ratings just aren't high enough. Wake up and smell the hatred. Wake up. You are not in the Matrix. Wake up. This is your life, baby. And I pray you make it. My name is Stacia Elmore. I'm also known as Queen Fierce. I represent New Voices for Reproductive Justice. Thank you all. Thank you. And I wrote that poem back in 2015 when we watched Sandra Bland get dragged across all of our hearts. And I said to myself, I'm not any different than this woman. I felt like she was my sister. I felt like that could have been me that was dragged out of the car and slammed onto the ground. I felt like I would not have done anything differently in that situation. So why is she dead? Why is she dead today? And I didn't have those answers. It perplexed me. I struggled with that. It was the first time I feel like in my life that it was so tangible, so closely relatable to me, that I so closely identified with this person that could have been me. And so year after year, month after month, even day after day, we've watched similar situations. We watched them. It's camera footage, y'all. We watched it right in front of our face. We watched them murder George Floyd on TV. We watched this and we developed these feelings of helplessness. We feel like, what can I do? Who am I? What can I do as one person to stop all this? I don't want to see this happening to my brother. I don't want to see this happening to my sister, my children. I don't want to see this. Why is this happening? So many questions burn inside of you. And so this feeling of helplessness continued to grow. And so it was 2020, last year, at the height of everything, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and I was feeling empathy in a way that I had never felt it before. My spirit was literally dragging through my home all of 2020 with this feeling of helplessness, with this feeling of, what can I do? And then I realized, you cannot feel helpless. You cannot put yourself in this place because that's how they want you to feel. They want you to feel like there's nothing you can do. They want you to feel like there's no power in one person. And so I decided to do something about that, and I truly believe that's the journey that led me to be a community organizer today. And so the message that I want to leave with you is, if for anything else, take the humanity from all of these stories and relate to it. There's something that somebody said here today that touched you. Take that and make it your feeling of empowerment, of something that you can do. Because I don't feel helpless no more. Y'all not gonna tell me how to feel. I feel like I'm one person and I'm connected with this person and that person and all y'all, and together we know what we can do. Because the power is us. The power is in the people. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Our next speaker is Alonda Talley, a black woman who happens to be transgender, who pronounced our queen mother, she, her.
Hey everyone, how y'all doing today? My pronouns are queen, mother, she, and her. And I say that I am a black woman who happens to be trans, but the first thing, before anything, is black. I remember that. I'm gonna be jumping around. So if you can't keep up, just ask me later. But I'm gonna say this. I remember it was a protest that I went to, and I was chasing after Yane, and I could see the white cops, and they was pushing people. They was pushing white people, black people, anything that stood up for this right. But they got to me. They pushed me, and my ancestors rolled up in me, and I whooped their ass. I dragged them, I pulled them, and I felt my ancestors in me. But when the wig came off and they realized that I was born a male, they bust me upside my head, bust me in my chin. And when I was sitting down on the ground, they bust me in my kneecap. And none of them white motherfuckers was touched. I am a product of the drug epidemic, the crack epidemic, and we're not going to even touch that because now heroin touching on white people. Now they want to get safe houses. Well, where the fuck was y'all when the crack was around? I was born among my mom. She told me, who now has 11 years clean, so I'm happy for her. Because she used drugs with me when I was a child. My father, who I didn't know, died of HIV/AIDS. I didn't know none of that. He used to shoot up heroin and stuff. I'm saying all this because I am a product of everything that happens. I get hurt, I get beat, I use crack, cocaine, all of that. And I'm gonna break my anonymity. I went through NA narcotics. That's how I learned how to speak like this, because I paid attention to them. And when they spoke at the table, and they ain't need no mic. So I remember all of that time and stuff and whatnot. So I want to just say all of this, that when I went to jail When I went to jail, I didn't like the jail just because I was the way I was. I didn't want to have sex with all the men. And the guy he spoke about they spray your cheek. Guess what? They told me repeatedly to do it because I was feminine. They abused me too. They told me I couldn't go to the yard because my chest was forming because of the hormone I decided to take. I had to go back to the block and I had to stay in my cell because I was able to come out because I had on a white t-shirt. They lied and said that I was called one of the women, white women, a faggot. Why would I call her a faggot? That just don't make sense. I called her a faggot and they put me in a hole. I spent 933 days in a hole. Because the CO dragged me, they dragged me and said that I tried to put my hands on them. So to say all of this, I know what my black brothers go through. I know what my black women go through, so I speak for all of us. Whether you recognize me or not, I recognize my damn self, and that's what matters today. So what I am trying to say, all in a nutshell, we go through it. The white motherfuckers put us through it no matter who we are. And I want to just say this. So when you see me as a black trans woman, the men that I choose to date is called trans men who were born women. So what does that make me? Heterosexual, gay, trans, I don't know. Stop putting me in your motherfucking box, bitch. I'm in my own box. I created my own box. I go through my own struggle. And I want to say this. And I want to say this, I got a lot to say, so it's not enough time. I'm going to put it out there. The LGBTQ, white motherfuckers, out there to them. Y'all think that's your excuse, the way that say, I've been through something. Bitch, you ain't been through shit. You don't know what I go through. When a white woman trans up there and they say, oh, she got in the House of Congress, oh, I don't see me. They treat me just the same way. I want to say this in closing. Today, I went to an appointment for an organization, and they help you with funding because I need it. But it's ran by white people. They just put a black name as a director just to hold it. When I got there, they didn't have an address, and me and my lover didn't know where to go, and I was frustrated. Things was ending, and I just didn't understand. Why the hell would y'all be there? Y'all just want to say y'all doing something. Y'all ain't doing not a damn thing. And then, I'm going to keep saying closing, but it's this thing, and I don't know if y'all on social media or not, but I really want y'all to think about this. It's a black man, and he said some things about the LGBTQ community, baby. Now, I look at that, and I say, damn, he did come for us. But it's to teach and educate because he was a product of his environment and because he was taught that. So he put it out on that, so he didn't know no better. But what we not recognizing is that it's another way to tear the black man down. I see that. I will not put up the post, but we have to forgive them because that's their trauma. You don't know what happened to that young man if he was molested, because men get molested too. We have to teach. We have to tell our story. You know, my pronoun is a queen mother, she, her, you know. And this is just a part of my story. But thanks for allowing me to share.
The next person I would like to introduce is a poet. Nefertiti is a Philadelphia-based poet, writing about her experience as a black woman in a struggle. Nefertiti started writing at the age of 11 and performing spoken words at the age of 27. She is currently working a book dropping in 2022. Nefertiti.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Alright, so what's going on? I'm actually not going to use the microphone. How y'all doing tonight? Alright, one more time. How y'all doing tonight? Before I start, I just wanted to say, like, I appreciate everyone coming up here and just sharing their story and being vulnerable. I know that's not easy to do in spaces, so shout out to y'all. And yeah, so my name is Nefertiti. I'm not gonna get into like all the things that I've been through. I'm just gonna share some pieces that resonate with me. So excuse my profanity too. This first piece has a lot of cursing in it, so please forgive me. I say nigga a lot, so bear with me. And I actually wrote this piece just because I was having a conversation with someone about experiences as like a black woman and feeling like I wasn't really being heard, and asking me to kind of like lower my voice a little bit, and like everybody isn't trying to hear the shit that I'm talking, and I'm like, nah, like people need to hear it. So that's where this piece came from. It's called Pipe Down. What the fuck you mean I should pipe down? I can't believe how you sound, telling me I should watch my mouth and curb my tongue. Why, so they could whitewash my mom and murder my son? Shit, ain't nobody got time for that. These days is one of the hardest times to be black. So I'ma walk like this, and I'ma talk like that. I'ma pump my fists and embrace my black. I'ma walk like this, and I'ma talk like that. I'ma pump my fists and embrace my black. Cause everybody wants to be down until it's time to be down. But won't nobody raise a hand when you're being beat down. Mass murderers are the cops that are walking the streets now. You want us to trust the police? How? Black kids are being murdered, and I can't see why. I guess being black and youthful is now considered a crime, but I'ma pack a deuce just to see a pig fly. Cause I'm frustrated with the system, and I feel real militant. I'd rather die for my black than to die on my back. You got me fucked up, and if you want war, you better buck up. Cause I came with a gang of angry blacks, and we stay strapped, ready to take our name back. So the next time a motherfucker tell me to pipe down, watch my tongue, I'ma tell him right now, I am not the one. I'ma aim my gun, maim they son. I want my reparations, it's payday, these motherfuckers better run. Hey. I want my reparations, it's payday, these motherfuckers better run. So everybody wants to be a nigga until it's time to be a nigga. But it's straight silence when a cop pulls the trigger. And I don't give a fuck if you're uncomfortable, it's just what the struggle do. Thank you. I appreciate y'all, thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry, left the microphone, my bad.
Yeah, thank you. Our next speaker, Deandra, is a Philadelphia native dancer and organizer. She is a member of Black Alliance for Peace and the Free Anti-Campaign.
I'm gonna try to be short, but I don't know. Hello, is this on?
Let me check the volume.
Is it on?
Keep talking.
Hello? I'm talking, I'm still talking, still talking.
I think that's the wrong that.
Still talking.
That might be the other speaker.
Oh wait.
Oh.
You're trying.
I'm trying it now.
Oh,
Word. Okay. Again, hello, how are you?
Good.
Good. Okay. Well, as was said before, my name is Deandra. I am a member of the Black Alliance for Peace, the Philadelphia chapter. And I'm also a member of the Free Ant Coalition. I will explain more about that in my speech. And I like to tell people I'm a queer black communist. And I'm a communist because capitalism centers capital and communism centers community. It's in the root. So yeah, like I said, I'm here with Black Alliance for Peace, and just to explain kind of what they do, they're a Black-led African diaspora-wide organization that's dedicated to advancing the anti-imperial struggle throughout the world. So basically, the U.S. needs to leave its hands off of all this shit. Right. And so what I'm really going to talk about here today is unpacking like the carceral system from the root. And Assad Shakur reminds me that radical simply means attacking the problem at the root. on what crimes get overlooked for which people. There are identities that, because of oppression, put people in positions where so-called crimes are the easiest way to secure survival. Because the system relies on Black folks and marginalized genders constantly being denied stability, we are more likely to be accused of crimes, to be caught up in the system, and forever be labeled as criminals. To add to that, because we often live in communities where survival is a constant struggle, we are more likely to come into contact with police, who we know will accuse us of a crime for whatever they feel like. And on top of that, there are crimes that are not born directly out of survival, but out of trauma. Those crimes are also political because the conditions that created the trauma are enacted on oppressed people by the capitalist system. So because we know that crime is a political creation, it's no surprise that it's weaponized against those who are trying to survive the system and those who try to speak out against that oppression. It's not a new phenomenon for folks to speak out and then be subject to retaliation via the prison industrial complex. In fact, suppression of marginalized groups is the very basis of the carceral system. From the dawn of the United States, slaves who dared to call out the inhumanity of slavery were punished. Once slavery was over and capitalism continued, because we all know that capitalism comes from slavery because the first capital was slaves, the prison industrial complex was codified from that punishment. To this day, we have folks who have taken a stand and protested being targeted for incarceration. So I mean, we're talking about the Black Panthers, we're talking about the Move 9, we're talking about Mumia. I mean, up till this day, we're talking about Josh Williams from the Ferguson protest, who's still in jail to this day. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm part of the Free Ant Coalition. That's my homie from West Philly, who is facing federal charges for protesting during the George Floyd uprisings here in Philadelphia. His trial is actually in September. Yeah, and they're really trying to get my man's out the paint. So, to this day, again, like I'm saying, the prison industrial complex is weaponized against those who speak out against it, as well as those who are just marginalized off-grid. So, that's locally and that's within the US, but we also know that the United States not only uses their construction of crime within the borders of their settler colony, but exports their political lens of crime abroad. They create dangerous enemies of countries who dare exert their own self-determination and use these designations as reasons to drone bomb, invade, and insert themselves into other countries' political processes. We see how they continue to uphold a blockade against Cuba to punish them for their refusal to bow to capital. We see how they murdered Gaddafi in Libya when he dared forward self-determination for his country. We see how they attempt to meddle in the politics of countries like Haiti and Venezuela. On crime as an issue and not seek the root of these issues are not interested in the well-being of their community. When Danielle Outlaw stands in front of a crowd and denounces shootings without talking about the money given to police instead of community centers, she deliberately, on purpose, misses the point. When Mayor Kenny pleads with residents to stop the violence instead of dealing with the fact that Philadelphia is the largest poor city in the country or ending stop and frisk like he promised, he also deliberately, on purpose, misses the point. Violence and crime do